What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Extra Serving, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I am Sam Okus, editor-in-chief of NRN. This week, we are talking about McDonald's expanding its relationship with Krispy Kreme. We're also talking about the latest consumer price index and jobs report, what they mean for the restaurant industry. And we're going to also recap the Create event for emerging restaurateurs, which we are fresh off. It is cold. It feels like fall. I'm wearing orange. And it means it's time to recap Create. But I'm going to do that with my colleague, executive editor of NRN, Alicia Kelso. Alicia, welcome.
You're wearing orange. I'm wearing a Detroit Lions sweatshirt.
Well, you have something to celebrate in that regard.
Not really, because Hutch went down, but whatever.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But a blowout win nonetheless. By the way, I want to make clear that this orange is in no way, shape, or form an endorsement of the Cleveland Browns, of whom I claim to be a fan of, and yet... And I mean, there's so many times that I've said, okay, I'm going to call it. I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to do this to myself. But I think we're at that point. I think genuinely I'm ready to call it. And I tell you, the orange, it's very easy to shift to Cincinnati. And I know I've talked about it, but I think it's time. I think I got to go full Cincinnati Bengals down.
Detroit might be closer for you. I think that probably
well, at least I'd have a winner on my hands if I cheered for Detroit. And I don't mind cheering for Detroit as much as I mind cheering for that other team in that state. Anyway, we don't need to do that, though. We don't need to get into too much football.
It could be all day.
It could be all day. With lots to talk about. Okay, Alicia, if we sound a little hoarse, that's because we are back from Nashville, where we hosted Create, the event for emerging restaurateurs, as well as the second annual Investment Summit. So there was lots of talking, lots of schmoozing, lots of great content, panels galore, speakers galore, partying on Broadway in Nashville galore for some of us, Alicia. Well, let's just talk broadly speaking. What was your take on this year's Create?
Sure. No, this was my second one. Obviously, our third overall, I believe. And
fourth.
Sorry. I still feel kind of new here. I absolutely love. I can't overstate it enough. And I know this was our second year for the Investment Summit. You know, I'm sitting at this investment summit with a table, and I wrote about this in my LinkedIn newsletter last week. My dad was a restaurant operator. He was a single unit steakhouse owner. So I grew up watching him sort of manifest his dream in this really hard industry. And I was sitting at this table with these emerging operators and just asking them about their concept. And we ran out of time. And so then we carried the conversation on to, the reception where we had some wine and continued conversation. I just love this event so much because these people here they're here for a reason. They just want to pour into every bit of information from these incredible investors that are willing to help and understand what they need to do to sort of get their brand, the attention, in front of the right investors to grow. And I love that we have a strong group of investors willing to share their information, their time. And I love that we have these emerging operators with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units who want to understand how to do that. And the whole coming together at this event was bigger than last year. It was more enthusiastic than last year. I feel like we're really, this is like I said, it's my favorite thing. And it's a ground floor situation. I really believe this industry is so unique. Andrew Smith said it best that, he used to be in tech, and he believes that this is the only industry where you're actually in it for the people. And every other industry is more, driven by making money. And I think that couldn't be more clear than at this investment summit, where, again, you have these seasoned operators and seasoned investors telling these operators who are just getting started or maybe have been in it for a long time how to go forward in this challenging environment. It's really what is the saying, Sam? A tide lifts all ships or whatever.
Rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes.
Yep.
To me, I walk away from this event feeling very a really strong tailwind. This is what this industry is about. We cover the bigs. Earnings season we're in it because Domino's reported last week, but this is what it's about.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. And for those who are not familiar with the Investment Summit piece of Create, these are kind of two events stuck together as one big event. But, the Investment Summit rolls into Create. And the Investment Summit is that opportunity to connect with the investors face to face, to learn from them, and then to network with them. And we had 20 plus investors in the room last week at the Investment Summit. And yes, Alicia, everything you just said, these are emerging operators who, and this was our theory, and it was totally validated, which you have these folks who have, 5 restaurants, 10 restaurants. There's some bigger groups who had maybe 50, 60, 70 restaurants as well. But especially just, those who have just a handful of units, they've been doing this in some cases for many years. Some of these people I met, they've been doing this for a long, long time, but they've never crossed that threshold into let's tap into institutional capital, or let's at least learn what are the financing options available to us. And this is the opportunity to put those people in the room with the investors and have those conversations. And it was just really exciting to see those conversations happen, to see people get really charged up. We will 100% do this again. We'll keep doing this and bring these investors together with the emerging restaurant operators to have those conversations. And listen, we recognize that deals, I don't know if any deals happen. I don't know if anybody walked away from Nashville with $1 million deal in their hand. Although I did hear anecdotally from at least 2 investors that they had conversations with people they're going to take a long, hard look at. So there could be deals that come out of it, but that's not the point. The point is the connection, it's the education, it's the networking. And yes, Alicia, everything you just said, this is a people business. People drive the restaurant industry. And even with these investors who are in charge of millions and in some cases billions of dollars, when you are a part of the restaurant industry, even as an investor, there's just something so very human about that. So
can I extrapolate that about Absolutely. The human aspect? This is so kind of weirdly personal, but my wife and I met at Columbus Pride in 2005, and we were in a pedicab driven by Mikey of Mikey's Late Night Slice.
Mikey Zaboro, yep.
Yes. There's a concept in Columbus, Ohio called Mikey's Late Night Slice. It's a pizza concept by the slice, pretty straightforward. This was in 2005, and he was driving us in this pedicab, and he said, I'm just trying to save money for my dream, which is a pizza by the slice concept. That was almost 20 years ago. And I distinctly remember, in fact, I took a picture of him and sent it to my wife. I'm like, do you remember Mikey, the guy that drove us in the pedicab? And he was doing that pedicab company to save enough money for that, quote, shack that he opened his first location in. And now he's got, 10 locations. And we had the hot concepts, brands on the hot seat pitched to a group of consumers, which I thought was really cool. And they just all 3 of them knocked it out of the park. And now it's, like I said, 20 years later, and Mikey's got a cool little concept and a lot of momentum. And that was something that was deeply personal, where I distinctly remember this guy's conversation, because I started working in the restaurant industry, and they started kind of growing real slow. I'm like, that's that guy. That's that guy in the pedicab. And, he's since sold his pedicab business and is now pitching. Don't worry. I had a glass of wine and went up and told him all about it. Well, and that was cool to see.
I love that you told that story, because he brought the pedicab up in his pitch. And to clarify, brands in the hot seat, we brought 3 brands on to stage to pitch their concept, and Mikey's Late Night Slice was one of them. And me being in Columbus, Mikey and I connected over a couple of Budweisers at this divey bar here in Columbus. And after the 3rd Budweiser, I think I said, hey, you want to do this? And he's like, yeah, why not? and I didn't know what to expect, but he got up on stage and absolutely crushed it. He and his business partner, Bryce. Anyway, we digress, but it's a great way to illustrate the humanity of this industry, but yet the need still for those resources for growth. So if you're an emerging restaurant operator, and if you, for whatever reason, are not familiar with Create or with the Investment Summit, mark your calendars next year, October 15th through 17th, 2025. That's when Create is back in Nashville. The Investment Summit will certainly happen again. Or if you want more information before that, please do let me know or let Alicia know. Our information is very easy. sam.okas@informa.com, alicia.kelso@informa.com. Reach out to us, because we can also plug you into these people. We want to be that conduit between the restaurant operator and the investor. We want to be that growth resource. I will also say one final note about Create. The rest of Create, by the way, the rest of the program was phenomenal. The content I was so excited about, an amazing keynoter in Candace Nelson bringing her story to life, going from somebody who did not expect to be a restaurant entrepreneur to a point where she's sold sprinkles, cupcakes, started a pizza concept, Pizzana. Now she's the queen of cupcakes, maybe yet will someday be the queen of pizza as well. And her story, I want to also point out, talking about the humanity and the heartbeat of restaurants, our Founders Forum was, I think, my favorite to moderate, because the Founders Forum is always this venue for people who have made it, quote unquote, founders who've spent several years building a business, and, that business is successful. And then they come and share their tips and advice for the emerging restaurateurs in the room, especially the founders in the room who are in the same position they once were. This year's lineup was Tim McHenry of Cooper's Hawk, Nick Stone of Bluestone Lane, and Cameron Mitchell of Cameron Mitchell Restaurants. And all three of them just brought to life these incredible stories of their challenges, the opportunities along the way. Again, that heartbeat of the business is the founder. And that's what's so exciting to bring founders to the Investment Summit to Create, because you can see, 20 years from now, that passion will still be there, right? These people have built their business over, 20, in Cameron Mitchell's case, 30 plus years. And still that passion is there for what they're doing. Alicia, you moderated the CEO conversations, and you also have very passionate people. Tell me about how you felt that one went.
Yeah, it was cool because we sort of springboarded off the Founders Forum. Like, hey, this is what they came up with creatively to start their concepts. How are you sort of carrying their flag? Well, forging your own sort of vision and leadership style. My favorite was the diversity of the panel. We had Hawaiian barbecue, Alicia Flores, all the way from Hawaii, and Liz Williams with El Pollo Loco, this 50-year-old public brand. Steve Kislow from Firebirds, which is a really cool, polished, casual concept that is just firing on all cylinders right now. And speaking of firing on all cylinders right now, we had Alex Dunn, who was named CEO of Swig in March. And, that obviously, I think everybody by now has heard of Swig or will in the near term. And it was just to take the diversity of those concepts and the diversity of their experience. Steve Kislow's been there for 21 years, working his way up at Firebrands, and he's still very motivated with that brand. Whereas, Alex Dunn and Liz Williams have only been on board for a couple months, but they've already put their plan into place. And then, of course, Alicia Flores, this was her family's business. And, this is a growing category, Hawaiian barbecue. She's touted her brand's differentiators, that they're Hawaiian based. They always will be 100% franchised. Just this really cool conversation all around.
Yeah. The makeup of the leaders certainly on our agenda, but also in the room, I think, what just felt right in that sweet spot of where these conversations need to be. The small up to mid-market chains that are in growth mode, and the conversations around, what does growth look like? How are you doing this? I need help. This is how you do it. That's the vibe of Create. So once again, if you want to be a part of what we're building with Create, mark your calendar for October 15th through 17th, 2025, Nashville, Tennessee. Come join us next year. It'll be bigger and better. I guarantee it. But you can still be a part of what we do every day, because let's face it, we talk to these people throughout the year, and we are always building that community, and you can be a part of it. So just let us know. All right, Alicia, let's jump into headlines. People want to know what's going on in the news. We kind of kept one eye on the news while we were in Nashville. You especially, Alicia, you can't stop, won't stop. You're always going. And we're going to start with McDonald's and Krispy Kreme. McDonald's, of course, began offering Krispy Kreme products in some of its locations in your neck of the woods, in Louisville, Kentucky, and now they're expanding that to Chicago. Alicia, I know you got thoughts. Tell us.
I have thoughts. We're not supposed to have opinions as journalists, but like you said, this started in Louisville, Kentucky, which is where I live. It started in October 2022, which is the month I started working for NRN. So I think it was like one of my first assignments. I remember driving to a McDonald's and making my wife eat a donut on camera so we could get it all documented.
That's how you knew this was your dream job. That you had to go get a donut through a drive-thru.
And I will not eat on camera, Sam. I know it's not in my contract. So, But it was fascinating to me because it was close, and I've always been intrigued since this launch. Been intrigued with the idea because there's a couple of things at play. This is going to expand the access for Krispy Kreme. Which is what this brand is trying to do, has been trying to do for as long as I can remember, at least since they've been public, is expanding their points of access. I can't think of a bigger way to do that than, leveraging a relationship with the country's biggest, by sales company in McDonald's, about 13,500 units. The partnership seemed to be going well enough to expand to 200 restaurants around Kentucky in early 2023. In March of this year, the two companies announced that their goal is to expand this nationwide by the end of 2026. So this is ramping up. I don't know another way to explain it. Now, there are certainly revenue possibilities here. In fact, I wrote about what the possibility is for both companies, and it's certainly attractive on paper. McDonald's executives have noted, quote, that this is a chance to unlock those new business opportunities, especially in the breakfast category, as well as throughout the day. You think about incremental revenue for franchisees. In a note published in March, their analyst Mark Kalinowski estimated that the initiative could drive added weekly revenues of $1,032 to $1,432 with a per donut retail price of $1.29 to $1.59. Now, that's a lot of numbers, but essentially it would equate to about anywhere up to $74,400 in incremental sales per restaurant. And then, of course, there's going to be an opportunity for Krispy Kreme here to expand their points of access. Importantly, as part of that Kalinowski research, he surveyed the franchisees, and 57% of McDonald's franchisees are on board with this versus just 29% who said no. Now, personally, I have concerns and challenges are too big of words for me. I don't think that's the case here. I just have some questions, I guess. Mm-hmm. Krispy Kreme, if they're going to go nationwide with this rollout, they're investing a ton in their infrastructure to ramp it up because supply is an issue here. There's a McDonald's directly across the street from my kids' ice arena. He's got hockey games at 6:30 in the morning and then another one at 9. So we always go to this McDonald's to get donuts in between for him and his teammates. And sometimes they're out at like 7:30 in the morning. Sometimes they just don't exist. And that's not just at that McDonald's. I have gone to plenty to McDonald's in the area to understand the supply chain issues. And it's very inconsistent, to put it politely. It's really inconsistent. I'm also interested in what this pricing is going to be. Now, McDonald's franchisees tend to set their own prices based on market, but in Louisville, and I'm saying that wrong, I realize, Louisville. I have gone to a McDonald's across the street from my house where I spent 14. And I've got to look at receipts.
You literally brought receipts.
I do. I brought receipts. A 6-pack variety with the tax was $14.19. Last week I went and got one and it was $11.69. Now I'm hoping when this rolls out, franchisees will lean toward the $11.69 price because $14.19 compared to Kroger and Walmart outposts that sell Krispy Kreme donuts, it's a 43% markup.
Whew.
So are we striving for convenience in a value environment? I don't know, that's a big markup. It's almost like you're getting these donuts delivered.
Yeah.
with that markup. And so that's something that I'm certainly keeping an eye on, and I'm able to because again, it's here in Louisville.
Well, that begs the question, do you have Krispy Kreme locations in Louisville or no?
We do. I think we've got about maybe 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so that's the interesting thing for me is I'm like, when I look at this relationship on paper, it makes a ton of sense, right? As you were describing, right? This is in some ways a match made in heaven where McDonald's can add an attractive breakfast proposition with limited complexity. Krispy Kreme gets the scale of McDonald's to get its product out there and to make some new fans. But that's my first question is, I'm somebody who has a Krispy Kreme. I actually have a Krispy Kreme closer than a McDonald's, and that's unique.
It's weird. Yeah.
It's weird. It's unique. But, easy access to Krispy Kreme. So I would not ever have an occasion where I'm going to McDonald's for my Krispy Kreme. I can go to Krispy Kreme for my Krispy Kreme. And I also think about the quality component here, which is the fact that Krispy Kreme is very committed to that fresh baked donut, to the point where I have very disappointedly arrived on site and been told, I'm sorry, they're not fresh yet. And I sat there in the parking lot waiting for them to be fresh. And it was longer than I would have liked when I have kids begging for donuts back home. But, how is McDonald's ensuring that same quality? That is actually, I would ask you, Alicia, what are the operational processes here for the McDonald's operators? Limited complexity, I say, but still, how are they maintaining a fresh, warm donut for customers?
I don't think that's the point. And this isn't a Hot Light Now situation. They're just delivering it every single day like they do at the Kroger and Walmart outposts at Krispy Kreme. And Krispy Kreme is ramping up in those places as well. I know that they're trying to lean into that Walmart partnership, especially. But this is not, like I said, Hot Light Now. This is delivered daily. I see the truck across the street when I, occasionally when I go to the gym. I don't think they're coming multiple times a day. I just think it's a one and done a day.
Yeah, because then it also makes me think about Red Robin Donato's, where there's also the opportunity to, again, expand your footprint without a build out. I think that relationship is probably more built around delivery and the opportunity for Donato's to deliver in Red Robin markets. Versus this way, it's more Krispy Kreme having the opportunity to be in a McDonald's drive-through. And for those who are going through McDonald's drive-through for coffee and they want to add on the donut, that being the opportunity. So anyway, suffice it to say, on paper, I think this makes a lot of sense. And we will see as they continue to expand this relationship, if it can continue to grow. We will be watching that closely. I know you will, Alicia.
Yeah. And the point is it's going to Chicago. It's going to enter Chicago this week. And they chose Chicago because that's McDonald's home and they have hub and spokes there.
Yep.
So hopefully that consistency issue won't be much of a challenge up there.
Very interesting to watch. All right, let's move along to a couple of reports that are very good for the restaurant industry. So first off, we have
good-ish.
Good-ish. You have to caveat everything you talk about when it comes to data these days.
I'm super Pollyannish, but let's
nothing is truly good in this economy, but we have good-ish news to share. Let's start with the consumer price index, which is, you said it was what, 3.9? 2.9?
Now I gotta find it.
Anyway, it was
restaurant prices are up 3.9.
3.9%.
The overall CPI was 2.5.
But I think the good news, the silver lining to point out is that restaurants growth in their pricing slowed as compared to grocery. For the first time, grocery increased more than restaurants. Did I get that right, Alicia?
So it's been a long time since the gap between the two shrunk. Just a skosh.
That's the goodest news.
And it's been a long time. It's been over a year, I believe, since we've been able to say that, and we've seen a lot of the impacts from that, and notably in terms of low income consumers trading out of the restaurant industry in favor of grocery prices, which have trended lower.
There you go. That's the one. So then the jobs report, I will add, had a lot of good news all around for the economy. And of course, the jobs report is watched over very hawkishly these days, you might say, with the presidential election coming up. But the jobs report was very positive, much more positive than most economists expected. And the restaurants were largely to thank. Restaurants last month added roughly 70,000 jobs, which was, I believe, the highest in 2 years. Very unexpected. Hiring tends to be up, as you wrote, Alicia, in your great story on this topic. Hiring tends to be up now as summer break ends, students go back to school, and restaurants are needing to hire, but they hired even more than was expected. So why is that good news, Alicia, for the restaurant industry? What does it say about the direction of the industry?
Yeah, I think it's good news for anybody who was operating a restaurant, particularly in late 21, early 2022, when we went through a historically high labor shortage and we had to trim back hours and in some cases days, and in a few cases closed because we just didn't have the labor. So we always want that hiring number, to be pretty robust. I think, might be some PTSD from that period. And I think, if the positions are out there, and you were right, we're at 69,400 jobs, The average added during the prior 12 months, each month during the prior 12 months was 14,000.
Wow.
So that's how much, September's numbers just sort of blew things out of the water versus previous months. We want robust hiring because that means that we are staffing to support business. If restaurants aren't in need of those positions, that means business is probably flailing or slow or worse. And we're at 12.5 million as an entire industry now, which is that's eclipsing pre-pandemic. So, I think any signs, any signals that get us back toward normalization is good. Like you said, especially in this environment, which is still a very weird environment. I can't even, we've got good ones, we've got bad ones, we've got bankruptcies, we've got everything in between. So we'll take the subtly shrinking gap with grocery to maybe win back some of those low income consumers that have left, and we'll take a robust hiring roster. And payroll, it's also worth noting that payroll outpaced inflation too, which is a good sign because this restaurant, obviously, as you know, is very dependent on discretionary income.
Yeah. And I would say it seems, and this is, perhaps biased, but I should say I feel real optimism among the restaurant community. And I think that was on display at Create. I remember at FS Tech, there was real optimism when we were at FS Tech last month in Dallas. It tends to be in these down economies, restaurants especially, a real dire kind of feeling about the direction of things. But I haven't felt that. And again, a little bit biased maybe, but I'll point out at Create, the final session that we did at Create was our brunch and learn session with our partners at Technomic. We had 6 wonderful operator representatives on a panel offering their opinions on the state of things and being very good sports because we framed it like a game show because that's just kind of what we do at Create. But, that question was posed to them. Are you optimistic for 2025? Yes or no? They all had these little yes, no things they could lift. Now, what are they going to say, I guess? Would anybody really be so brave as to from the stage say, no, I'm not optimistic about 2025? But all 6 said, yes, I am optimistic about 2025. All 6 said they expect to grow in 2025. And I say that mostly to say these numbers are very good for the industry. And I just feel like things are trending up generally in a sense of hopefully that gap continues to close between restaurants and groceries so that restaurants, food away from home, starts to become more of the demand from consumers, and jobs continue to lighten the load for the restaurant operators. Inflation hopefully will continue to cool, and all of that could combine for a very, very positive environment in 2025. Of course, we've said this now for the last couple of years. 2022 is going to be a boom economy. 2023, just wait and see, So I expect, take that with a grain of salt. Much to be seen over the coming months with elections and such. So we'll see what happens. But I sense optimism. Alicia, do you feel optimistic about things? Anyway, we're going to move on.
I want to be optimistic. I think some things are going in the right direction. Some things are unfortunately stagnated. I think, Chris Kempczinski came out last week and said he still thinks 2020, the McDonald's CEO, he still thinks 2025 will be rife with challenges, particularly on the low income side. We're, like I said, we're about to go through the throes of Q3. We'll get a better sense of guidance for Q3. I want to be optimistic. I, was voted most positive in high school.
No big deal. I had best hair. Anyway, that's a story for another day.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it will be maybe less challenging than this year. Hopefully, gosh, I hope.
Well, on that note, we got to turn things even higher than we were, more optimistic than we were before. We're going to jump into the extra serving of this episode, and very excited to bring on our senior food and beverage editor, Bret Thorn. Bret, welcome to Extra Serving.
Thanks. Always glad to be here. How you doing?
Oh, we're doing great. We're just talking about all sorts of cheery things over here, or at least one of us is. Alicia, we'll get her there. Bret, what we want to talk about is a really important subject. We've talked about data so far in this episode. We talked about partnerships. Now it's time to talk about SpongeBob, because of course, who doesn't love SpongeBob? My household doesn't, but that's a story again for another time. Maybe at the end of this episode, you guys can convince me. We have started to see, and maybe we've already finished going through this cycle, but starting with Wendy's a couple of weeks ago, we have seen, dare I say, a dozen or so. I mean, there's been so many partnerships between corporate restaurants and some even small chains and independents with SpongeBob, which is there is a movie coming out, a SpongeBob movie coming out. It's not uncommon, of course, to see partnerships between Hollywood IP and restaurants. That's, of course, a great marketing opportunity. And SpongeBob, we all expected some of this marketing, but it's been a little insane just how many restaurants have come out with SpongeBob branded products. Bret, first off, why are we seeing so many SpongeBob products?
You got me. I don't know. I'm old Gen X, so SpongeBob came out when I was an adult, and I don't care. And I don't have kids, so I don't care.
We're not bringing the optimism back, I don't think.
No. I just because I don't care doesn't mean it's not important. And having the right menu tracker every week, there are all sorts of collabs that I don't understand that have to do with comic books or anime shows or any number of other things that aren't part of my world. But the glorious thing about the restaurant industry is you can tap in to whatever niche market you're into tapping into. And SpongeBob is not niche at all. But a lot of the restaurants that have teamed up with Paramount are pretty niche. We got Harlem Shake, which has, I think, 2 locations, one in Harlem and one in my old Brooklyn neighborhood of Park Slope. You got Randy's Donuts, not a tiny chain, but not one of the huge blockbusters, and they have a donut that is designed to look like a Krabby Patty. I had to ask my colleagues why all of these collabs also have something pineapple related, because pineapple under the sea.
Even I know that one, Bret.
Yes, well, now I do. Joanna Fantozzi, our colleague, was good enough to tell me that SpongeBob lives in a pineapple.
Well, the theme song very famously starts with "Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?" And then, of course, you're supposed to shout SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, and Alicia, we need to bring you into the conversation because, as you posted on LinkedIn, your family last year dressed as SpongeBob characters for Halloween. So I feel like maybe this is near and dear to you.
Yeah, my kid is super into it. It's 25th anniversary. This is what, Bret's, he said he's old Gen X. I'm a little younger Gen X. This is one of those things that really bridges generations. My kid and I can watch it together and find the same humor, which I can't say about everything that he watches, and he can't say about everything I watch. So the 25th anniversary is a big deal for a number of reasons, because it's just so culturally relevant after 25 years. And, there's an estimated 90 million people who watch this cartoon each quarter around the world. It's been translated into more than 30 languages and more than 180 markets. And there was actually a collaboration. What was it called? Krabby Patty collab or something.
They're all called Krabby Patty collabs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where there were over 120 restaurant concepts that were selected for this collab. That was forged by Nickelodeon and Paramount. So Wendy's just happened to be the biggest one. The other ones, like you said, Bret, were small regional kind of brands. But, I would lob this over to Bret. To me, it seems like a really creative way, to bring in not just a tie-in, but something that is creative. We heard a lot about limited time offerings at the Create event, in that they're at record highs right now because our traffic is so muted, that LTOs are just a really relatively simple, easy, and very sexy way to bring attention, new news, and ideally traffic into restaurants. And this just seems like a sort of that good balance between something that is culturally relevant and something that could potentially bring in people like me and my kid together to talk about this cool Krabby Patty that's actually been brought to life.
One, and it's interesting that Randy's Donuts collaboration seemed like a lot of work. They had to develop a red velvet cake thing that looked like a tomato on a Krabby Patty and stuff. But for the most part, either renaming a menu item or Wendy's developed a sauce. Sauces are, it's a lot of work to develop sauce, but it's not a heavy lift for restaurants operationally. So Brooklyn Dumpling Shop just did a bacon cheeseburger dumpling, which is totally in their wheelhouse, and they just called it a Krabby Patty. And they're serving it with Dr. Kelp, Diet Dr. Kelp, I believe, which I'm just guessing is Diet Dr. Pepper. I asked them, they haven't told me yet. They haven't gotten back to me. So
that would be too easy, Brett. That'd be too easy.
One restaurant has a pineapple lemonade, easy enough. You just add pineapple to lemonade. So they're easy adaptations, but something that probably their audience will respond to. And the thing about all of these sorts of collaborations is that you end up reaching a different set of consumer than you might otherwise, and therefore expand your fan base. And independent restaurants do this a fair amount with visiting chefs and stuff, and that's a great way for two email lists to come together in one great event, and everybody wins. I don't think there's a downside at all to any of this stuff. It's good.
I do feel like I might end up being a case study here because, as I said, my family does not watch SpongeBob. Now, as the elder millennial of our crew here, I missed the SpongeBob train. So 25 years ago, I would have been right in the wheelhouse of, early viewers. But I don't know. My parents didn't. I just didn't get into it. So I was not a SpongeBob fan. Therefore, I did not end up sharing it with my children. And so they never caught on to it. Frankly, they know who SpongeBob is. I don't think they know much about it. However, we are a big Wendy's household. My son, especially, who is 5, he has already asked me to take him to Wendy's at some point this week. And I will have him try it, and we'll find out. And then we'll see, does that get him to then want to go watch SpongeBob? And I don't know the answer to that. Now, I did have Wendy's SpongeBob Krabby Patty collab already because I got to visit the test kitchen here in Columbus a couple of months ago. They were very kind as to let me test it. It's pretty good. I actually really genuinely like the sauce they've developed. Our friend John Lee over there at Wendy's, overseeing the culinary team, did a phenomenal job coming up with that. And the Frosty, too. I believe the pineapple under the sea Frosty, very, very delicious. This is good stuff. I would order it, even without it being tied to SpongeBob. We will see if my kids end up getting into it and if that inspires any kind of desire to watch the show. I will say, like any other kids, Alicia, maybe George is too old for this now, but usually it's the toys that do it more than the food because a toy is going to catch their attention more so. But I also don't love coming home with all of these cheap little toys that end up in the trash can after a week.
Tchotchkes.
The tchotchkes. Yes, exactly. Okay, I want to do a quick lightning round because this feels fitting. What would you like to see of any pop culture collaboration with a restaurant? What would you like to come to life? Just give me the pop culture. You don't have to bring the restaurant to life, although if you've got that too. What pop culture?
I will say, I know that. I know that the tip of McDonald's France is doing a Friends collab for 30 years, and I was squarely in that. Friends is my jam. I could recite most of the episodes, and I want that to come here.
You want that? Okay, there we go.
I do. Yes. Yep.
This seems like the Friends Perks coffee shop. There's more to work with the coffee shop, right?
Tons there. Yes, you could do the turkey. You could do it all.
Well, someday, Alicia, maybe you could bring that to life. Start a restaurant. We'll see. Brett, what's the pop culture collab you want to see?
The first thing that came to mind was Battlestar Galactica, which is kind of old school, but it was the original series in the 70s was hot garbage, but the reboot around the turn of the 21st century was amazing. It was so good. I don't know what kind of food collab it would be, but
some sort of science fiction, space age kind of restaurant, something or other. I don't know if there's a restaurant particularly suited for science fiction.
The McDonald's in Roswell.
It can't all be McDonald's, Alicia.
That my family and I visited in April, and it was really weird.
McDonald's cannot do all the pop culture collabs.
They can.
But
they can.
There are future-themed restaurants at Epcot, I believe, and that would work.
True.
I think Mars 2120 still exists somewhere in Times Square in New York City.
Well, if you go to Star Wars Galaxy at Disney World in Florida, you will find all kinds of fun space age food and beverage, exorbitantly priced, but very creative if that is what you'd like to see. So Battlestar Galactica, that would align very well with something like that.
What's yours, Sam?
Okay, so I gotta say, we don't do SpongeBob, but that's because there is another kids television show that has taken over our lives. And fun fact, this show was the most watched TV show in the United States in 2023, I believe.
Is it Bluey?
It's Bluey. Bluey is the most watched television show in the United States. Some of you who don't have children might be saying to yourself, what the heck is Bluey? Brett, are you saying what the heck is Bluey right now?
I mean, I would have, but you mentioned it while we were at Create a few days ago. So
I talk about Bluey probably too much. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's an important part of your life. And
one of these days, I believe, Brett, your nieces and nephews are maybe too old for Bluey as well. Because I was going to say, go watch it with a child in your life. But it is the most wonderful show for kids and parents because it is not obnoxious. This is where SpongeBob, for our family, we're like, okay, a little bit too much. Let's dial it down just a bit.
Are you judging me?
The one time I watched one SpongeBob episode, and I thought it was pretty good.
It is funny. I'll give it that. It's got a good sense of humor. But, someday when my children are old, when there's a Bluey 25th year anniversary, which would put it, I believe, in like 2043 or something like that. It's been around for a few years. So at that point in time, my children will be doing what today's Gen Z millennial is doing for SpongeBob. They'll be doing that for Bluey because it is every night we cap off with 2 Blueys because they're 8 minutes long. They're good palate cleansers. They're not obnoxious. They're very charming. I don't know what restaurant's going to bring Bluey to life. And frankly, some of them might have already done that because Bluey is gaining a lot of momentum as a part of families' lives. But it's Australian. So there's just a lot of good overlap there you could play with. I don't know, Vegemite or something. You could get some sort of Australian delicacy in there.
I mean, I don't know why Outback Steakhouse hasn't already done something with
It's
Bluey.
too perfect. Outback, if you're listening, get in on the Bluey train. I mean, that IP is probably really expensive at this point because it is so doggone so doggone popular. But you never know. It's low-hanging fruit. Brett, I don't want to let you go before asking you, what did you think of Create in Nashville? Any takeaways you want to leave us with?
I mean, Create was sensational. It was the audience engagement was so good. People were so completely embedded and involved. But my main takeaway, and what a lot of people spoke about, was the importance of their own teams, their own people. I moderated a panel on labor. And the takeaway from that was that despite the fact that a lot of people like to say, oh, kids these days, they don't want to work, they're lazy and shiftless, and you have to, kiss them and rub their bellies to make them feel happy.
I know I'd like my belly rubbed.
I mean, all the time. But they, what they said, and I thought the key takeaway from that is just tell them what your expectations are and hold them to them, and they're fine with that. And I mean, that's true. You two have kids. I think if you tell your kids what you want from them, like they might not do it right away, but that certainly makes it easier if you clearly communicate your needs, and you should do that to your staff as well. And, the fact that labor is no longer the biggest concern, it seems, traffic is the biggest concern, is a big shift. Because labor, like even before the pandemic, labor was always the complaint. And so now we just need customers to go to restaurants again.
There's that optimism I like to see, and it's a fine note to end on. So Bret Thorn, Senior Food and Beverage Editor for NRN, Alicia Kelso, Executive Editor of NRN. Thank you, as always, for joining us. That's all we've got for today. We'll talk to you next week.